this is a fun webinar series that we're talking about, and I look forward to this one all the time because cancer is one of those things that affects everybody. And even if you haven't been diagnosed, you've never been diagnosed, you know someone who has. So cancer is one of those things you have to develop kind of this fearless immunity to it. That's what this whole webinar series is about, is to not just live in fear of these diseases or these viruses or whatever we're going to be talking about along the way, but to be educated enough about them to know, at the very least, if you look at the most basic definition of them, what is causing them in your body and what you can control. Because there are parts of these things that you can't control. You're not going to be able to control every little bacteria and virus that you come in contact with. You certainly can't necessarily control your genetics that certainly play a role in cancer, but as you'll learn today, may not play as big of a role as you think. And so we want you to have power to control what you can control. So that's kind of what this whole webinar series is about. And cancer is obviously, it's really easy to get fearful of cancer very quickly because it is such a detrimental disease. All right, so what is cancer? You can look at the standard definition from the the National Cancer Institute that just describes and defines cancer as a set of diseases which abnormal cells divide without control. They invade nearby tissues and they spread to other parts of the body through the blood and the lymphatic system. That's kind of the simple definition for it. But if you look at the more advanced definition to it, it's really when a cell refuses to go through its normal life cycle and then die. That's programmed cell death, which is supposed to occur. I know cellular death doesn't sound like a good thing, but cells are supposed to have a life cycle, just like we as humans have a life cycle. They're alive, they pass on their DNA, and then they pass away. And that's what should happen with a normal cell. It's called apoptosis, fancy word. So we're going to be using some big words here. So I've actually got some big sheets of paper. So if I say these words, you don't have to necessarily be confused, and if you want to look them up yourself. But the first one here, apoptosis, that's just a fancy way of saying that's normal programmed cell death. And so tumor cells and cancerous cells refuse to die. And so we need to figure out a way to obviously avoid that damage that forces them into becoming essentially immortal cells and let them get back into what is going to help them get back into a normal life cycle, which is to pass away eventually. So that's kind of, like I said, that's the more advanced way to look at cancer. And obviously, if you had talked to an oncologist, like we certainly have lots of patients who are oncologists, they would have kind of a different working definition for you. And every cancer is different. So I'm not saying that that's the only way that your cancer may be developing. If you're listening and you have that diagnosis, there's a million different ways these cancers can evolve, but that's kind of the broad strokes of it, okay? So that's what cancer is. The physiology of a cancer cell. There are certain aspects of, it's kind of like what we talked about last week actually, is like the terrain and the environment creates this physiology inside of your normal cells, forcing them to become cancerous cells. It's an adaptation. Cells are not supposed to become cancerous just because they outlived their life. They adapt during the course of their life, and that turns them into these immortal cells. So our body's made up of trillions of cells, and they're supposed to grow and divide and pass on their DNA to the next cell. But when the cells become damaged, or like I said, if they live past their normal life expectancy, they get replaced abnormally by these cancer cells. And cancer occurs when this process doesn't work. So it's an out of control growth of these abnormal cells, which once they become billions of cells, this is how many cells it takes to become an actual tumor. It's literally billions or potentially trillions of cells before they're big enough that they form an actual tumor, which you might feel if you were doing your breast exam, or you might see on a scan if you were doing a prostate scan.
Which most times that takes years to develop those billions or trillions of cells.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but most times. Yep.
A good rule of thumb for most types of cancer, and again, there's all sorts of different types and aggressiveness to these cancers, is that every 90 days, cancer cells will double in size until they become literally trillions of cells, and that usually takes 4 or 5 years. So they double in size about every 90 days. And again, lots of different cancers out there, so it's just kind of a broad strokes. Every 90 days it doubles until 4 or 5 years later, it's big enough to actually form a tumor, okay? So that's kind of the physiology. Now, what are some of the things that force these normal cells to become abnormal cancerous cells? We look at, again, every cancer is different, but for the most part, cancer cells feed off of glucose, which is sugar. So the more sugar you're eating, the more sugar that your body lives off of, the more those cancer cells have a chance to thrive. They don't need oxygen to thrive, meaning they're anaerobic for the most part. There are a few that are aerobic in nature, but anaerobic, meaning lack of oxygen, is going to promote normal cells to turn into cancerous cells. Toxicity, meaning the good things aren't getting into the cells and the bad things aren't getting out of the cells. That creates this environment where normal cells become cancerous cells. Basically, in other words, the environment that you put these cells into largely is what dictates whether or not you're going to get these cancer cells growing and multiplying inside your body.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on the anaerobic thing, so if you're not getting oxygen into your body, this is kind of huge, especially right now, that's allowing cancer cells to grow into your body. So deep breathing exercises, not only has that been shown to decrease your body's cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, which Dr. Xavier will talk about in a little bit. Getting oxygen through your body is so important for your overall health. And also even bigger than that is exercise. Like your body, if you're not getting oxygen through your body, pumping your heart rate, getting your heart rate going and getting the oxygen into your body that way, you're creating an environment that cancer cells like to grow in. So you have to get your heart rate going and you have to exercise.
Now, you have an immune response to cancer. Believe it or not, even if you have cancer to this day, your body is constantly trying to fight it off. Unless you had some type of chronic immune disease like HIV or AIDS, your body is going to have an immune response to adapt to these cancer cells. So as you can see on this slide, cancer is basically equal to an unsuccessful immune response to get rid of those bad or damaged cells. And that's why we're talking all about immunity during these webinars here. Yep. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail with that here in just a second, but just look at cancer as an unsuccessful immune response. And when you look at it in that sense, it becomes a lot more empowering for you because we know that there are things that you can do to boost your immune response to these things. And we always think of immune response and we think of bacteria and viruses, but it also has a big role to play in cancer as well.
But if your body can't fight something off, something as simple of, and I'm not talking about COVID, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the colds that you get a cold every single year, you get a sinus infection every single year, you get the flu. If your body can't fight off small things like that, then that's not saying good things about your immune system. So that's not something to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the stats on it, guys. I'm not going to read through them for you. The United States ranked 7th in the world when it came to overall cancer. We had the 7th highest rate of incidence of cancer in the world. So there's 190 countries in the world, and we were the 7th highest. Yeah. And you think about that, 7th doesn't sound that bad because some of you listening might know, hey, we're not doing so great in other statistical categories when it comes to our health. So it shouldn't be a shock to you that you know that cancer is not that bad. Cancer is now the #2 killer in the United States. They're actually predicting it might eventually catch heart disease as the #1 killer in the world. Some of that is because of diagnosis, but other parts of that are because especially these hormonal types of cancers are really growing rapidly and out of control. So 7th, especially now, also consider the fact that we spend more money and have more resources to spend on cancer than any other country in the world, bar none, and we're still getting worse. And this is not the doctor's fault. This is not the nurse's fault. These are people who are truly trying to get to the answers that we need so we can hopefully, cure cancer if there is such a thing, but at the very least, correct it and fix it once you're diagnosed. So it's not the people, it's just that, the way we go about it, we dig ourselves into such a deep hole. And so then we look at and say, well, if cancer's so bad here in the United States, what countries are doing it well? And those are the Mediterranean countries. Like they're having high consumptions of fruits and vegetables. They're getting good, healthy fats in their diet. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So the environment that you put these cells into is what's going to determine your rates of cancer, especially here in the US. So don't let fear overcome you. You need to overcome your fear. Cancer is one of those things, like, again, when we talk about it, it's a fearful word. You say the word, you immediately kind of incites fear in all of us. But through the 5 essentials and through what we're going to be talking about here today, you'll see that it's absolutely possible to educate yourself enough to prevent it if you haven't gotten it. And the thing I always like to throw in about this is this webinar series and this webinar presentation specifically is not about how you can cure cancer, okay? We are not cancer doctors. We are not going to treat your cancer. We are just helping your body function better to fight it off and to be healthier environment for those cells to live in.
Hopefully not get it in the first place.
So yeah, the 5 essentials, we'll run through them here really quickly, is just core chiropractic, #1, because the nervous system controls every function in the body, nutrition, mindset, oxygen and exercise, which we'll talk briefly on today, and then minimizing toxins, which is going to be a big part of cancer prevention as well. Yeah, got to have the right mindset moving into this. If you get diagnosed or a loved one gets diagnosed with cancer and all you're thinking is doom and gloom and, oh no, there's only so many things we can do, then you're not going to be able to go about it objectively and say what is best to not only prevent or treat my type of cancer, but what is going to help my body function better. You're going to be looking at it from the disease model, which we talked about this last week. You don't want to look at it from the disease model because the disease model just treats the symptoms. And, there's not many symptoms necessarily related with especially early types of cancer. Cancer only really starts causing symptoms when the tumor burden becomes so large that your body starts physically shutting down. So have the right mindset. Don't set yourself up for failure from the get-go.
And Dr. Xavier said something pretty important there. And the way that we approach our health and the things that we look at is truly function. How is your body functioning? How are your digestive organs working? How are you sleeping at night? How is your pain healing? Like, function is how you need to determine your health. And when your body isn't functioning well, it's not healing well, it's not developing health. So pay attention. Your body's always talking to you. We say that all the time, but I just don't think I can say it enough.
Yeah, and don't stress out, because stress, we know, stress is toxic to the human body. That more toxic environment, the more likely you're developing cancer in the first place. Cortisol has a big effect on that from a hormone standpoint, but I'm also going to talk about kind of the difference between physical stress and mental and emotional stress.
And I think every single patient that we have that has some kind of chronic condition is extremely stressed. Like, stress is a major deterrent in your health. I mean, we say it every time we adjust you. We're saying like, wow, did you have a really stressful week? And you're like, yeah, how'd you know? Well, I can feel it in your spine. It creates a musculoskeletal reaction inside your body. But more than that, it's chronic stress is a big deal, and you need to figure out what are your ways of coping with stress. For me, it's getting to the gym. That actually helps my stress levels. For others, it's meditation and prayer. Like, you have to find out what's causing your stress, and if you can eliminate it from your life, and if you can't, what can you do to de-stress, to combat from it? Stress is a big deal.
We're saying stress a lot, but anytime I say stress, I also want you to think inflammation. We know inflammation is not good for cancer cells, but here's where I want to break it down a little bit. There actually is good and bad inflammation. Not all inflammation is bad. For instance, like Dr. Liz said, if you went to the gym and worked out, your muscles are getting broken down. In order for them to repair themselves, there has to be inflammation there to signal the hypertrophic effects that build that muscle back up. That is more of what we would call like an acute stress. And that is good stress, good inflammation, because what it does, and there's another word, here's the next fancy word for you. It's called eustress, which I know that just sounds like something somebody made up, but it is an actual word. You can look it up. It is essentially the opposite of stress. Eustress is how that's pronounced. So when I say eustress, that's good types of stress. It actually has been shown to have wonderful effects when it comes to cancer. They think that as far as exercise and its positive effect on cancer, this is the big reason why. So I'm going to kind of break this down. Like I said, when you work out, you create oxidative stress, you create inflammation. That's what induces or creates mitochondrial biogenesis. A fancy way of saying that your body is literally going to create healthier mitochondria, which is, back in grade school, you remember learning that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's your energy, right? So the way your cells use and adapt to their energy sources is probably the number one factor that's going to determine cancer in your life. The type and the way that it adapts to the energy sources available. So the healthier the mitochondria, the healthier the cell. Simple as that. So eustress, or working out, or any type of good acute stress, creates that mitochondrial biogenesis. Then then that mitochondria creates also reactive oxygen species, which is, think of it as a fancy way to say the reactive oxygen species are good things that happen inside your body, like antioxidants would be an example of this, that help create that good environment for your cell. That has a positive hormetic effect, meaning the stress response, yes, it's negative at first, but then your immune system kicks in and creates a positive response to it, which then next time that happens, hey, you get an even better immune response, and your body is getting stronger and stronger time after time.
That's pretty cool, honestly.
Right? So it signals not only to the cells, but then to your genes as well. And genes don't cause cancer. It's only when genes have mutated that they actually cause cancer, but it actually signals to your genes to make more of the things that help fight off cancer. Now, if that doesn't sound like a win, I don't know what does. But if you can somehow signal your genes to fight off cancer better by creating these acute situations of stress, like working out. What's another good example of this would be like if you do get sick and your immune system takes over and you heal it. Now you build up those antibodies for the next time. That's kind of like a.
Do you think the infrared sauna would?
All those things help with it, of course. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that. I'm just wanting to go broad strokes here. So acute stress is good. The bad inflammation, the bad stress is chronic stress. And the number one that I think has to be dealt with is like chronic stress. Number one would be like, think of your gut. If you're punching out lesions in your gut because of chronic bad foods and chronic cortisol levels being out of control and medications we put into our body every day of our lives over and over and over again, that chronic stress is not good. It's not setting up a healthy environment because your body never gets a chance to heal from it. All right. So that's essentially the difference there. Okay. So again, keep that in mind is yes, we're talking about stress, but the physical part of it is the inflammation as well. So, all right, nutrition. I'm not going to go through every single little detail that I've ever learned about nutrition when it comes to cancer.
It's not a nutrition workshop.
Well, it's not a nutrition workshop, and also not every piece of nutrition advice that I'll give on cancer is going to help every type of cancer. For instance, ketogenesis is one of those things. They're actually in the process and rolling out like ketone supplements now. Like you can actually kick your body into ketosis or artificial ketosis.
Which we are not fans of.
It's good and bad. Like I said, scientifically, it's proven to reduce tumor growth, so it's not a bad thing, but it's not every type of cancer. So you can't just look at ketosis and say, yeah, that's good for my type of cancer. You can't just look at every type of cancer and say that eating healthy fats is the only thing I need to worry about. But there are a few things that I definitely want to hit on because they make a huge difference. Cancer cells, like we talked about, need to go through that normal life cycle. That's called autophagy. Next big word. You ready? Autophagy. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that 100% correctly. That's just how I've always pronounced it. But autophagy, that's that normal life cycle, coming alive, dying when they're supposed to die so you don't get cancer. Cancer cells, the big reason why they become immortal is because they don't have anything, when they do become immortal, and the reason why they don't go back to healthy cells is because they don't have anything to push them over the edge to get them back to a normal healthy cell. They pass on their damaged DNA to the next cell. So there are some things that you can help when those cancer cells are ready to die to help push them over the edge. I'm going to go through them just kind of in a list-like order. Number one, intravenous vitamin C supplementation. It needs to be intravenous because oral doesn't have the same effect on cancer cells. Vitamin D. I mean, we've talked so much about vitamin D.
Can I just say one thing about vitamin D? And we need to get to my part, so we can't talk too long. But we'll show this video in the hot seats when you guys are here next week. But there was a study that was done on vitamin D, and they put breast cancer cells in a petri dish, and then they put vitamin D in with the petri dish, and the vitamin D ate all of the breast cancer cells. Like, it's amazing. Yeah.
Zero sugar is the next one. Zero sugar is a great way to kind of kick your body out of that, or kick the cells out of that disruptive behavior. Exercise, and then fasting for, yeah, I saw you put that up there. Yep, it does. Yep. Fasting absolutely induces autophagy, but that's not necessarily good for every single type of cancer because it could kick your ketone levels up, and ketones for certain types of cancer actually are used as fuel. So the number one source for most types of cancer is glucose, but another one that they really like is ketones for certain types of cancer. So fasting may not be the option or the best option for everybody, but if you're healthy and you don't have a cancer diagnosis, fasting is going to be good. All of those things, IV vitamin C, vitamin D, zero sugar, exercise, and yes, fasting, or a fasting mimicking diet. I don't really like the term intermittent fasting anymore, but fasting mimicking diet, all of those things disrupt normal cancer cell growth to kick it back into that autophagy, which is normal programmed cell death cycle, okay? So keep that in mind when we're talking about nutrition. Like, I want foods that are high in vitamin C and high in vitamin D and have less sugar, and of course I need to exercise, and occasionally I'm going to need to give my digestive system a break as well, okay? So when it comes to nutrition, that's all I really want to hit on. Now we're going to go into a few specifics. Like, this slide talks about damaged fats versus good fats. Why are these so important for cancer prevention, and not only prevention but treatment as well? Is because the cell membrane is what keeps the good stuff in the cell and lets the bad stuff get out. And when it comes to that, transaction, you need to have a healthy cell membrane. Damaged fats create toxic overload around the cellular membranes, actually damaging the channels where these good things get in and out and the bad things get in and out. The good fats, simply just replace those. So you got to know the difference between the good fats and the bad fats. And obviously the good fats, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the bad ones because it's pretty simple. Vegetable oil, canola oil, greasy foods, fried foods, all that stuff bad. The good stuff, like we always talk about, wild caught fish, nuts and seeds, avocados, avocado oil, coconut oil is another big one. I have a lot of research I'm doing on that right now on coconut oil and how wonderful it is for prevention of cancer as well. So just really cool stuff when it comes to good fats versus bad fats. I think probably the easiest step that you can take to avoid cancer is this right here, getting rid of commercial meats and going to grass-fed and grass-finished. Because outside of the price difference, all it is going to a local farmer and buying it from them instead of from Walmart.
We have so many resources for that here in Kentucky. It's amazing. Yeah. There's so many different options. We use Fox Hollow Farm for our beef, and we use Skinner Farms in Shelbyville for our chicken. Yeah,
and along the same lines, also avoid those cured meats because they are high in nitrates and nitrites. Again, those are one of those things that are going to create a heavy toxicity load and breakdown. Minimizing toxins is Dr. Liz's slide, but before I get that, I do want to hit really quickly on genes, and I'm still going to take very long, but we hear cancer and genes lumped together. Genetics are what cause cancer. It's not true. The P53 gene is the one that's most closely, it's a tumor suppressor gene. It's the one that most doctors look at when they look at genetic damage that can lead to it. But P53 gene doesn't cause cancer. It only causes damage when it mutates and it stops. P53 helps that autophagy normal life cell cycle. So when the P53 gene mutates and it no longer is doing its job, then it stops that normal cell cycle. It's largely affected by RNA, and RNA is what passes good DNA down to the next cell, right? So if you want to create a healthy environment, it's not only helping with this generation of healthy cells, it's helping with the next generation too. And there's a cool study out from Ohio State right now. I'm not going to write this down, but there's a new epigenetic marker for this P53 gene or these tumor suppressor genes. And what I love about it, the study, it's called the H3K4ME3 gene. It's an epigenetic marker in the genes. Yeah,
that's a lot.
I don't even know what that means. But what they said is that it's purely damaged and it's based on epigenetics. Epigenetics, if you break down that word, it's not the genes, it's the environment that you put the genes into. So again, all I wanted to say with all of that is that this cool new study from Ohio State, which go Bucks, by the way, is showing that even on the most drastic form that we think of cancer and genes, it's still largely caused by the environment. Okay, all right.
All right, so I only have a couple minutes to talk about a lot of things, but okay. So last class, if you listen to it, Dr. Xavier and I talked about GMOs and glyphosate and how glyphosate, so GMOs and meat, those are personally our number one things. They are, if you were to pick one thing in your household, that they're just a non-negotiable. For us, it's GMOs and it's meat. So we talked about that last time, but today I really want to hit on BPA and how that affects our health. So BPA, it's basically what it is it mimics estrogen in your body. Okay, so estrogen, obviously it's a hormone, and what happens is your body recognizes it as an estrogen, but a fake estrogen. It's called a xenoestrogen. And of course that messes with our hormone levels. And so many of these chronic diseases, they begin with, messed up hormone levels, basically. So it's an endocrine disruptor, meaning they disrupt the hormones, and here's where it's mainly found is in plastic. So ideally you wouldn't be buying your food that's stored in a plastic container. You absolutely don't store your leftovers in plastic containers. You don't drink out of plastic water bottles, even food cans, even some cardboards, even they have BPA as well. So it's even inside CDs, which, we really don't use CDs anymore, but eyeglass lenses, which is wild. And it's also a developer in thermal paper receipts, which I actually didn't know that one until I started studying for this PowerPoint. So the more that you can get your receipts emailed to you instead of printed, that way you don't even have to touch those thermal receipts. And even directly from the EWG, they said it acts like estrogen in the body and should be kept away from pregnant women and children in critical windows of development. Researchers have linked it to cancer, infertility, brain, nervous system, and cardiovascular abnormalities, diabetes, obesity. It contaminates in widespread processed foods and drinks and is a key component of the anti-corrosive coating inside 126 billion food cans. So that's crazy. And if that's not enough to stay away from it, I don't know what is. So if you're looking at your plastic water bottles, the bottom of them, or anything plastic that you're buying. So there's 1 through 6, 3 and 6. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you guys flip it over, there's that little triangle. So if you flip it over and you see a 3 or a 6, those are the worst. Those are the most toxic. Those are the most damaging to your health. And the best are 2, 4, and 5. And so I actually think it's 7. 1 and 7 are like, meh, they're okay. 3 and 6 are the worst. 2, 4, and 5 are the best. Don't touch receipts. I keep forgetting that for sure. Joe asked, what about the plastic pouches that food is pre-packaged in? You know what she's talking about?
Anything plastic that touches the food is no good, especially because it's mostly in the warehouses when they store it for long periods of time that it starts breaking down. So yeah, the more it's in contact with the food and the more it's stored, the worse it is.
Yeah, so just try to, if you can, buy food that's stored in, or comes in a glass container as often as you can. I know even things like our condiments, those are in our plastic containers, so we just try to limit it as much as possible. But again, our non-negotiables are GMOs and meat. So, but this is huge. It's extremely toxic to your body. And men, if you have low testosterone levels, that means that your estrogen levels are likely high. Women, if you're having trouble getting pregnant, your estrogen levels are likely high. And I'll talk about which supplements you can take to decrease your estrogen and increase your testosterone in women, help balance hormones, to help either 1, getting pregnant easier, or 2, making the transition through menopause easier as well.
These toxicities are a big reason why hormonal cancers, prostate, cervical, breast cancers are shooting through the roof.
Yep. So again, if there's one thing that you can do, eat less food out of plastic to help decrease your chances of cancer, do it. It's easy. Another thing that we're going to talk about is the toxic accumulation in fish. So we're talking about toxicity right now. I never thought about the, mercury. So basically you have to think about the toxic accumulation in fish. So the small creatures, they start by eating this bacteria, right? These bacteria, they have mercury in them. Okay, so then the small fish eats the bacteria, and then the larger fish eats the smaller fish, and then it goes on, and then we eat it. So it's called toxic bioaccumulation. We're the last person to eat it, meaning we are getting the most mercury within our fish. So you want to choose more wild caught, choose cold water, like wild caught Alaskan salmon. Stay away from anything farm raised. I'm pretty sure we talked about that last week too. But this is big. What are the bottom feeders? So oysters, right?
Shrimp, anything that's a filter feeder, clams. This happens in beef, by the way, too. This fish is the example we're using because it's easy. You think of little fish gets eaten by the big fish, gets eaten by the bigger fish, but it happens in your beef too. So if the corn that they're getting fed is sprayed with chemicals, not only do you have bad red meats, but you also have bad toxic accumulation from their foods too.
Yep. Okay, so this is huge. I want to talk about some of the supplements that you guys can take to help with decreases your chance of cancer. And this is a huge one, curcumin. So basically, this entire time, Dr. Xavier is talking about autophagy. Well, there are multiple studies that show that curcumin can actually induce cellular death and apoptosis. Show the apoptosis again. So that's when every cell in our body should die, and cancer cells don't die. And there's studies that show that curcumin can make that happen. So turmeric can be added to foods, but actually in the dosage that you want to get this turmeric or curcumin, you're going to get more benefit from it through supplementation. And then in addition, our food these days has unfortunately become so devoid of nutrients. It's just not the same that it was before. So curcumin supplement, we have one in the office. It's called curcumin C3. One study showed that curcumin to help kill, deplete, and eliminate cancer cells without harming the good cells. So that's the thing about traditional cancer therapy. like chemotherapy, and I'm not saying not to do it, like Dr. Xavier was saying, certain cancers are going to respond better to certain things, but chemotherapy will kill everything. It'll kill the good stuff and it'll kill the bad stuff. Well, somehow, I don't know how, but curcumin has figured out which cells are bad and only kills those cells. So this is just a supplement for overall health. That's great. It also helps with inflammation. He talked all about inflammation, joint health. So when someone has chronic pain levels and they're not willing to do the 10-day sugar detox, well, curcumin is another great one to be on too.
If you're going through conventional cancer treatments like chemotherapy and radiation, there are still a lot of supplements that have plenty of research backed up by this that say that actually help the chemotherapy and the radiation become more effective. So even if you choose the conventional route, that doesn't mean you avoid making these changes that we're talking about here today. Because like the doctor said, like for instance, testicular cancer in men reacts really well to radiation. So like in chemotherapy or one or the other, I can't remember. But you combine it with these types of things and it helps speed it up even more. Curcumin being one of them. Cook with it. And if you do cook with it, add black pepper because black pepper makes it more bioavailable.
And then this spice is commonly used in Southeast Asia. And if you look at the cancer rates in Southeast Asia, they're significantly less than here in America. So that's saying something right there. Okay, DIM, this is the supplement. So majority of us are estrogen dominant. Oh, you know what I didn't talk about? Your perfumes and your colognes, they are messing y'all up. They are also a xenoestrogen. So anything that says fragrance, your personal products, the lotion, the Bath and Body Works lotion that you use, I swear I hold my breath. When I used to go to the mall, I haven't been to the mall in, I mean, obviously a really long time, but I like hold my breath walking by that store, and I hold my breath walking by Abercrombie because that fragrance, it gets in your body and it's a xenoestrogen and it's messing up your hormones. So when someone comes in, a lady comes in the office, I'm like, you know, you smell really great today, but that's messing up your hormones. So that's huge. So if we wear perfume or cologne, we only do it on a special occasion. We spray it on our clothes and not on our skin. We make sure that the personal products that we're using, they're fragrance free, or if they have a fragrance, it comes from an essential oil. So that's huge. That's another way that we're getting estrogen dominance. Okay, so this is what DIM is for. So DIM, it's found in cruciferous vegetables, but you would have to eat an insane amount of cruciferous vegetables to get enough of this compound. But DIM will bind to those bad estrogens and pull them out of your body. So again, men, if you have low testosterone, you're likely high in estrogen, so you can take DIM and it pulls them out of your body so that your testosterone can naturally raise. We had a patient named Dan, and I had him take his testosterone levels were tested and they were on the low end of normal. We had him take this for a year. When he got his annual blood work the next year, his levels were optimal. So like, it works, it's amazing. Now, personally for me, I'm not taking this because I'm breastfeeding. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, I would not recommend taking this because you don't want to give all of those estrogens to the baby. But if you are not, then DIM is a great supplement to take. And our men, I would take this DIM, but here at the office, we have the women's hormone supplement. It has DIM in it. So you get DIM as well as all these other beneficial things. So it has a preventative effect against hormonal cancers like breast and prostate cancer, like Xavier's been talking about. So this is another great supplement.
You have to eat 2 or 3 pounds of cruciferous vegetables a day to get enough of DIM, so you have to supplement with it.
Yeah. Now, garlic is one that I actually would recommend incorporating into your diet. You can supplement with it and it would be great, but you can also but the thing is, it has to be raw garlic. So that would be like the last thing that you would add onto your food. But garlic possesses a variety of health benefits because of the sulfuric compound in it. So specifically, it's called allicin. This is just a great way to boost your immune system. So right now we want to boost our immune system as much as possible. Well, eat as much garlic as possible. But the research has shown that the cancer that this affects the most has been multiple myeloma, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah. Okay, and then probiotics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about probiotics because we talk about it all the time. You guys know that you need a good probiotic. And then this is the bundle. If you guys wanted to grab all of these supplements, they're 15% off next time you're in the office if you get the bundle. And then lastly, of course, your nervous system controls everything. As you guys know, I just wanted to hit on the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So most of us live in sympathetic dominance. And what that means is that that's your fight or flight response into your body. We are constantly going. Women, we have to take the kids here. We have to take them there. Oh, we have to work. Oh, we have to do this. We're everywhere all the time. Men, you have all these deadlines at work. We're constantly under stress, and we never are really taking time to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is called rest and digest. So that's the part of our body that allows us to calm down. It allows us to sleep at night. It allows us to go to the bathroom. And so your sympathetic nervous system, it's in the middle part of your back, but your parasympathetic nervous system, it's up in the upper part of your neck and in the lower part of your back. So when we adjust those segments, we're actually activating your parasympathetic nervous system so that your body can calm down and that it can heal, right? That sympathetic nervous system is great when you're running from a bear, because you're not going to be thinking about, hey, I need a nap. You're not going to be thinking about, oh, I have to go to the bathroom, but you have to get out of that every now and again so that your body can say, hey, I need to go kill these cancer cells that are growing in your body. That's what your parasympathetic nervous system is going to do. When we adjust those segments, guess what? We're waking up that part of your nervous system.
Megan said raw garlic's hard to incorporate. It doesn't have to be raw. Obviously, that's the best way to do it, but soups is a great way because you can just throw bundles of it in, and you can
bone broth and raw
soups.
garlic and some sea salt.
Yeah,
that's the easiest way that I can do it.
We do that as when we're sick. It really helps you fight illness.
We should do it more. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have for you guys. We only went 5 minutes over, so I think that we did pretty well. Next week, we're going to be talking about viruses. All right, so thank you all for tuning in.
Have a good weekend.